So you know when you're playing a video game and you're just in it? Like you forget that it's a video game and it feels like you're right there inside the world, totally and completely immersed. Well, there's one specific design choice that plays a huge part in a game getting me immersed to that level. It's called Diegetic UI, and it's one of those things that when done right is one of the most important design decisions that can drastically change how a game is played. So what is Diegetic UI? Well, you've probably seen it and interacted with it before, even if you didn't know what to call it. But in simple terms, Diegetic UI is any part of the user interface that exists in the game world, rather than pasted somewhere on your screen like a traditional HUD. So things like a health and stamina bar at the top of your screen, weapons and abilities along the bottom somewhere, or a mini-map in one of the corners. Instead, games with the Diegetic UI means your character has to actually whip out a map and read it physically. Sometimes it's a map you have on you, and sometimes it's a map nailed down to a table. Maybe it's an ammo counter that's on the weapon itself, like in Halo, which shows how many rounds are left in the magazine. Or your health bar being represented outside of a character's armor, like in Dead Space. Or my personal favorite, managing your inventory inside of a small computer screen on your arm in Fallout. The Pip-Boy is one of the best examples of Diegetic UI inside of a major RPG that really helps with immersion. When you compare inventory management in the Pip-Boy versus just the basic system in Skyrim, it's pretty easy to see which one can actually be sort of fun to interact with. You kind of have this attachment to your Pip-Boy, so interacting with it is more enjoyable, even if it's something boring like inventory management. Now, Fallout is an example of a game that has some Diegetic UI elements, but obviously isn't 100% a Diegetic UI game. Some games are between like 60 to 90% diegetic, like Fallout or Sea of Thieves, and even the Metro games, and many others don't have this type of UI anywhere in the game. Sometimes they're the exact opposite, like Baldur's Gate 3, which is filled to the brim with UI elements necessary for a turn-based CRPG. So the type of UI a game has really depends on what type of game is being made, so UI design is one of the most important things to figure out during the beginning stages of development. Because a game like Baldur's Gate can't really have a diegetic UI, it would probably be impossible, but a game like Phasmophobia is designed around it entirely. If you haven't played Phasmophobia, it's a game about searching for evidence of a ghost inside different locations. Could be a house, a prison, an insane asylum, and you gotta go in there with your equipment to start collecting data and clues to narrow down your search and correctly identify which type of ghost is haunting the location and complete various side objectives for bonus XP and money. Also, while you're doing the search, don't let the ghost kill you. Your character needs to interact with each piece of equipment in order to check for clues about the ghost you're dealing with, so this means reading temperatures with a thermometer, checking for ghost orbs inside of an infrared camera, detecting paranormal noises on a parabolic microphone, The entire structure of this game relies on having no HUD of any kind on your screen, and relying on the actual equipment to give you all of the information you need. Even seeing your character's sanity level, something else important to monitor during a contract, is only possible by checking a monitor inside your truck that's parked outside of the house. All of this lends to making Phasmophobia incredibly immersive and addicting to play for me personally. Seriously, I've racked up 100 hours in the last 3 weeks since I started playing the game. And I think a lot of that is owed to the fact that I'm sort of a sucker for games with diegetic UI. For me, it helps lessen the layer of video gaminess and helps fully immerse me into the experience. This doesn't mean I don't like or can't get immersed into a game like Baldur's Gate 3. That game is amazing. I'm currently in Act 3 of a co-op playthrough right now. But there's something about the feeling of simplicity in a game with minimal HUD. And I use the word feeling there intentionally. This doesn't mean games with diegetic UI are necessarily simplistic or basic. In fact, a lot of them are much more demanding of the player than most games out there. And that's because you can't rely on a HUD for information. Less watching and reading and more interfacing with the game environments and interacting with the gameplay tools. And that's the kind of stuff that really gets me sucked into a game because it requires me to fully interact with it. Sea of Thieves is another great example of a game that benefits from this type of minimalistic HUD. The game isn't entirely diegetic. You've got menus, radial wheels, and both an ammo and health bar that fades in during combat situations, but a lot of the most important information in the game needs to be derived outside of menus and a typical HUD, like events and activities that are happening in the world. Forts of the Damned, Ashen Winds, Legends of the Veil, and so on. You're notified of these visually in the distance. Your map sits in the captain's quarters and is necessary to navigate the seas, so you've got to be checking the map often to make sure you're still on course. There's nothing on your screen to show you which way the wind's blowing, so you really need to pay attention to the visual wind gusts and adjust your sails accordingly. On land, a compass and your personal map help you find quest objectives and buried treasure. And it's things like this that make Sea of Thieves more engaging than it'd be if it had a screen filled with all of this information already. It's when the game forces you to use tools like a compass, or have your friend run down to the lower deck to check the map and guide you, that is the special sauce that makes Sea of Thieves a great cooperative experience. But one of the most intelligently designed diegetic UIs is in Dead Space. Health and stamina are both represented on Isaac's armor. The reticle isn't a crosshair in the middle of your screen, but the beams from your gun projecting forward. Ammo, like in Halo, is shown on the weapon itself. Getting all this information jam-packed onto the character and into these items in such a tight and clean way is a real stroke of genius, and I applaud the devs for making this magic happen, because it really lends well to helping Dead Space feel immersive. And not really an example of diegetic UI, but a game that is an example of how sometimes less is more is with Black Ops Zombies. I know I'm not the only one that hates how modern Zombies is so visually cluttered with so much shit on your screen and menus to sift through during gameplay. The entire vibe, atmosphere, and immersion in Zombies has been completely gutted from the games over the last few years. Sure, it's dumb fun for a couple of hours, but it's not engaging long term for me personally because the minimalistic HUD and horror elements have been stripped from the game in service of a Warzone meets mobile game experience. I don't know about you guys, but I'd much rather be playing the one on the right. The Stalker titles, the Metro series, Firewatch, there's dozens of great examples of games with at least some level of diegetic UI. A lot of indie projects these days have it, but this style of UI was also very common in the early 2000s, and it's just one of the many reasons why I think those games hold up well and are fun to go back to for me personally. But let me know what you guys think about diegetic UI or games that have a more minimalistic approach to the heads-up display, and which games do you think do it best. Thank you guys for watching, leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.